So, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the final MotoGP podcast, last on the brakes, of 2022. I keep saying 2023 because that's what we're sprinting into on track already, but no, it's still 2022. And as you can all see, I'm Fran Wild, co-host Elliot York is back. We're back doing it digital, and we have the most special guest of all returning to debrief the incredible season and the test that we just saw, Simon Crafar, our 500 Grand Prix winner and pit lane reporter extraordinaire. How are you, Simon? We'll start with the easy question first. All good?
Yeah, really good. I needed yesterday to recover. I was fried, after
I'm glad you
the
said fried.
weekend, the live, yeah, the live all day on Tuesday, and the big drive home that evening, back to Andorra. Yeah, I was. You know how it is when you finally stop. I really stopped, and brain. I couldn't have done this yesterday. Not well anyway, but feeling much better today.
Good to hear it. And yeah, we're delighted to have you back. Your episode was one of the most popular of those in the first half of the season as well. So everyone loves you. But there's so much to
Nice to
talk
hear.
about as well. And yeah, I don't know, where do you want to start? I guess looking at the season and the test, the obvious place to start that almost is a bit of a formality to tick them off because of how impressive they have been. Pecco, Ducati, it's a lot of the grid, but it's also going so well. There's not that much drama to talk about. So, yeah, what did you see on track at the test after an amazing season that saw them do that triple crown?
Okay. I mean, the bikes that I saw in the factory Ducati garage were shiny new, meaning they were obviously built from brand new parts, starting with a new bike, And then you go to the satellite Ducati garages, the VR46 and also Grassini garages, and they were also, and Pramac as well. They were bikes that had been used, so either passed on from the factory garage, Grassini and VR46, that was happening, but also with the Pramac ones, it was clear to me that uh, yeah, they would have had updated engines, but the bikes they were using were the same. So I was really looking at parts that were changing. Like you could see things in the Pramac garage getting tried, especially Johan Zarco, the Aprilia style big ground effects belly pan, They made it really easy for us to see because it was painted in that camouflage grey and white that you see the new vehicles getting tested in. Apparently, it's hard to take photos of and see the shape, but it was pretty easy for us to spot. And there's things like that. But the brand new Ducatis they were happy with the engine update. I spoke to Tardozzi, and he was saying that they, as always, step by step at these tests, try different parts, confirm them. They'll work on one area, confirm that. I imagine engine is the place to start, because that needs to be homologated and can't be changed throughout the season. So you've got to get that right at the beginning, Portimao. And so that's, I think, where they have started. The reports I'm told is they are happy, no complaints. They're still working. The other thing that was interesting in Ducati Garage was aero, like quite different, smaller. Like if you at first glance it didn't look different, but it was smaller, slightly different shape, the whole front fairing. And Pecco, when asked about it, said he was buffeted a little bit more with the wind because he's less protected because it was smaller. You could see around the hands and that it was all narrow and a little bit further forward. The shape as it dropped down at the front, but tank sort of height a little bit lower, where those side pod wings are. It was quite a different shape in there. He said, although he got a bit buffeted from wind, less protected was the word he used. He liked it in the corners and that. So, but Valencia is a very tight track, so they need more data, and they need to look at it to see how much top speed they lose, but in the turns it's better. So it sounds like they've at least got something to try at the other tracks.
Yeah, for sure. The engines is something that has been a hot talking point throughout the year, especially with Yamaha. But when I spoke to Jorge Martin after the test or during the test, he said the engine feels like a big step forward or a good step forward. So that's not good news if you're the other competitors, because I know Aleix Espargaro and Fabio in particular, well, Yamaha in particular, we'll move on to Yamaha shortly, but the engines, is a massive topic, because from what we know, Yamaha had a very weird test with their engine. But is there anything else interesting that you saw with Ducati side? Because obviously they were the Triple Crown winners, won the Constructors, the Riders' title, the Teams Championship, had the best bike on the grids, and sounds like they've had a very positive Valencia test as well.
Yeah, the thing is, not exciting standout stuff. I mean, the bike is already the bike to be on, and they're not going to stray far from that. It's going to be little updates, If the engine is another step forward, that's really bad news. I'm not surprised that it is. They've had all year to work on the one they've got. The guys on the dyno back at the factory, they'll be working on that, and they know they have to make the delivery smooth, because that was the hiccup with the 22 machine before, you know what I'm saying, at the beginning of this season. Power delivery. The thing is, you can guarantee that they're going to make another step forward. A little bit step forward with the engine, little step forward with the aero, and that's not good news for the rest, because that's even widening the gap. And but there was nothing stand out. I mean, they're already in a fantastic position, so little steps on everything is the aim. They're not going to stray far from that. Even chassis-wise, I couldn't tell any difference from what they've been using. The rest of the bodywork, apart from that fairing. I should say that Pecco said he preferred the normal belly pan with that down ground effects like scoop, than the wide Aprilia style one I said was in camouflage. But really, that was it. And I'm not surprised. They'll be making a little headway in all areas.
They will, and like we said, maybe some bad news for their competitors. Although I would echo what Davide Tardozzi told us in, was it Sepang, that they'll supply whoever asks. So other manufacturers need to try and bring those satellite teams and presences back to the grid. But okay, well, Ducati, I mean, it was an incredible season for them, wasn't it? And also, like, the big thing that I took away from what Tardozzi said about Pecco's season was that they made mistakes as well in pre-season last year, and they didn't give him the bike that he needed. And you can see that in those first few races of the year. And then once he was on it, okay, there's a couple of mistakes like Germany and obviously Motegi, big one there. But if they can give him what he needs, what are your thoughts on the start of next year? And we have to ask, the beast is in red. What are your thoughts on Bagnaia Bastianini next year?
Yeah, okay. Regarding the Ducati, I think they don't. Well, it's become clear. I'm not surprised about this either. That they're not just winning in acceleration, and top speed, but they've got an advantage on deceleration. Stopping the bike, and when they can get the bike set up that the rear stays on the ground, they're having rear contact. That, however they do it, I don't know, but the engine brake management, the electronics, all of that, how they do it, the clutch is awesome. That it helps the bike slow down, and so it's good at scrubbing off speed quickly, and it's good at still scrubbing off speed at an angle, and that management helps take weight off the front tire, so you're not pushing that front on the way in. And the others, I think, are playing catch up in that area as well. So, let's move on to the riders. You were saying, Ducati made a mistake, you're right, with that 22 engine, when they, like I just mentioned earlier, it wasn't delivering the power smoothly. Then everyone on Ducati was, this is especially in Malaysia, Indonesia test, changing the setting of the bike, a bit more rear bias to try and get it to hook up. But as we know, motorcycles, if you change them in one area, it affects others. And that problem, with all of them scratching their heads, working with electronic settings, bike set up to try and fix that, that together with that front ride height device, which I'm not at all surprised that fried the brains of a few riders. Riders notice 2 millimeters of front height, 1 millimeter. You see them in qualifying go, stick one turn of preload on, and riders have always done that in history, try and find a little bit. They feel 1 millimeter. One turn is 1 millimeter. And you're talking about the front ride height changing 30 times that, maybe, 25, 30. That has got to affect the rider's brain a lot, And quickly they were all taken off pretty early on. Pramac bikes kept them a bit longer. Joe and Zarco persevered for most of the year. Then towards the end, got rid of it. Can't use it next year. He was saying they didn't see a clear advantage to having it, so focused on other things. I think all of this helped upset the start of Pecco's year, and not just Pecco, a few of the others as well. And the Beast didn't have to contend with all that because he was on a 21 bike that had none of those problems. It was already a well-proven bike, and it's not the first time it's been good to start the season on the satellite bike. Even when I was riding, I came across the same thing. The factory would veer off the wrong direction sometimes. Really easy to do when you're trying to improve. So I think that Ducati won't make that mistake twice. I think the start of next year, they know that happened. They won't do it again. I'm sure of it. So I think the rest of the Ducati riders are on the best spec of 22. That's engine, aero, chassis, everything. So that's a good bike. What Pecco and Jack finished the season on. Then, or at least Pecco anyway. We don't know if Pecco got some little updates and Jack didn't towards the end, which often happens if a rider is leaving the manufacturer. But Tadozzi confirmed the best spec, the last spec of the 22 bike is what all of the satellite Ducatis be running, and then the factory bikes will take another step again. They're playing with this new aero, playing with the new engine update, which sounds like it's a little bit better, and I'm sure that it'll hit the ground running this time. They won't make the same mistake as this year.
Didier said after his test on the GP22 that it was the best day of his MotoGP career. Obviously, he had a pretty difficult time of things in his rookie campaign. And from the outside, it doesn't seem like there was a huge difference from the GP21 to the GP22. But clearly, there's actually quite a big step forward with it, because Didier was like, I've never seen him so happy. He's obviously quite a smiley guy anyway. But he was, really singing the praises of it. And Alex Marquez as well, stepping off the Honda onto the Ducati. He was obviously very, very pleased as well. He got on with it really well, said it was one of his best MotoGP tests. And I think he was quicker, or he said he did some lap times that were quicker than he did throughout the weekend on the Honda. So after being on the Ducati for literally a few hours, he was already quicker than he was on the Honda. So that tells how much of a step the GP22 was from the GP21, and also how good that bike is as well.
I'm surprised because, for example, Enea downplayed the step. You know what I mean? Enea seemed rather happy. It was reading between the lines, listening to DG's debriefs recently. It sounds like they've had a few glitches, whether it was something wrong with the bike. He wouldn't say what it was, but your bike could be bent, something's not right with it. And I get the impression that there was something like that going on with DG's side of the garage, because later on they said they found this. He wouldn't say what it was. So Enea's been more happy, and he's possibly getting a little bit more support, being the factory rider for the next year. Anyway, it sounds like the new bike rolled into the garage for DG Fabio Di Giannantonio fixed all his problems. So good for him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he'll hit the ground running. Anea, like I said, downplayed the difference a little bit. He said, yeah, it's better, and it's the staff around you, and that's different. But he didn't say there was a massive step in the bike, He admitted there was a step forward, but not huge. Alex Marquez, I mean, imagine the step. He wasn't allowed to compare because there was still contractual obligations there, and he wasn't allowed to compare what was going on, which is fair enough. But you could see he was doing his best to hide how happy he was, to be respectful. But you could see. I've had a play on that bike, and I totally understand. It makes the job easier, at least till a certain level. It's wonderful. It does everything, and I'm sure that's what he experienced. He got on and just went, wow, this just does everything, And I have been, since hearing he's going to get on the Ducati, I've been a little bit excited about what we'll see from Alex Marquez this year, because there's very few riders that can force a bike that doesn't want to do something to do something. And the clear ones are, out there are Marc Marquez, Fabio, and Brad Binder. Those guys can do that. But it's not normal and it's not common. Most riders, to get that level and to go the same speed, they literally can go that same speed, but they need the bike to help them do it as well, And I think Alex is obviously one of those guys. I think with the right bike, he's going to be right there reasonably often in 23. I really do.
Cool. Well, yeah, certainly we've had some fun debates about this with him versus a World Superbike rider of who's your favourite. And there's a few of us who think that Alex will feature fairly highly next year as well on the Ducati. But okay, you've offered up the perfect segue there then. I was like, where do I go next? But I think we should go to KTM and the aforementioned Brad Binder. Obviously, incredible podium to end the season. They seemed fairly happy. The task that was sort of figure out what actually works and take the step back with things that don't and get back to basics before we build up again seems to have gone all right this season. They've obviously now lost Miguel, which does seem like a loss based on where he ended on the timesheets on the Aprilia, but they have of course gained Jack Miller, which is a big gain. Also an interesting one in that obviously Alex Marquez, he's going from the Honda to the Ducati. Not as useful for the receiving factory. Jack Miller, however, comes from the best bike on the grid and quite a long time on it as well. Do you think that's going to be really valuable to KTM as well? And what did you make of KTM's test?
Okay, let's start with what you said about Jack jumping on and how valuable that is, because I noticed something at the test that I thought was quite interesting. I looked in all garages to see where they were starting the test, and most riders who were staying with that manufacturer started the test to get up to speed on their normal bike, which totally makes sense. You get up to speed on your normal bike in case temperature or something makes something. You have your base, go, right, that's my normal bike. That's what it feels like. Now we'll ride that and see where it is, whether it's better and then you get a really clear feedback. And the majority of riders that changed brands started on the base machine, not on the prototype, if that makes sense, Get them up to speed on the base machine and then say, hey, is this any better? Give them the prototype, see what the feedback is. Totally makes sense. KTM did something quite the opposite, and I also understand why. I'll explain. They put Jack straight on their prototype for next year because, this is my opinion, when a rider is used to riding one bike, the Ducati, they only have one shot to compare with his fresh memories from the Ducati, to compare what that is like compared to that, and what did they want the info on, So they've given it away by rolling them out on the prototype. That's what they want the info. Where are we? That's, you've just got off the Ducati 22 machine. What's our prototype like, and where is its weaknesses? And because you only get that first run and a little bit of the second one, maybe, because humans, you start to adapt straight away, and then your memories start getting blurred and forgotten, and you just go with what you've got and try to go forward, And so they've used that first run, one or two runs of Jack on the new bike to get the information they wanted, because it's never going to be the same again, it'll be blurred from then on. And we don't know what he said, but I thought that was a really interesting approach. So let's go to KTM, what they've been up to lately. And you bang on when you say that, Fran, how this year must have been quite hard and frustrating, because their approach was for the future. And from the beginning of the season, they said, we're just going to go through, and it was quite obvious that they didn't have lots of hardware like the previous years. They were the winners of the volume of new hardware, always, new things were coming all the time. And they admitted to being unsure, getting a bit lost, and not having all the data on the equipment they had already. So they spent this whole year, and it must have been a bit frustrating for riders, but the whole year squeezing every last ounce out of what they've got. And it must have been quite frustrating, but at the same time, it looks like it's paid off, the approach, because they have squeezed more out of what they've got, and they've, meaning, I think, everything, because the Miguel and Brad, fantastic riders, and they just kept trying and trying, you know what I'm saying, with setups and settings and trying to get everything they could out of what they had. Now they turned up. They obviously got a direction, what they needed. It was really clear what they needed. Brad always talked about lack of turning, and edge and drive grip, too easy to spin off the turn. They're losing drive. And they turned up with a chassis, ran it in FP1. They had one of each. And Brad at FP3, so overnight, both bikes had those chassis on. He went with it. And he said that they lost a little bit front feel, and it was stopping ability and front feel going into the turn, but gained a heap of rear grip, driving off the corner. And Brad put it to good use, didn't he? Straight away. I mean, he's been saying, give me something. I've got everything I can out of this, but I need a step forward somewhere, And they did it, and he showed it, he put it to good use straight away. Then at the test, we saw, I thought, was the prototype bike with that same chassis, because it had some of the same features, well, all of the same features, but apparently it was slightly different again, like another evolution, or a different direction. And obviously those chassis were already built, and they wanted them all to be tested. Brad confirmed that it was much better on entry. He said easier to ride, better turning. So it sounds like he's really happy with the front of the bike for the first time I've ever heard, this sort of feedback. Real happy with the front of it, but it lost that drive, advantage, rear grip and drive off the corner. So KTM right now have a chassis that does one thing really well and the other thing really well. But the exciting thing is it's only a matter of time. Now they know what does that. It's only a matter of time before they make the combination or the, what do you call it? The compromise between those two, I think they've at least got the info. Does that make sense? And that's why so we can talk about aero and everything else that Brad tested and Jack and Pole. They all tested the new aero, the 23 prototype bike, which would have had an updated engine as well, and this chassis. And it's the first sign to me, and I've been really curious about this for 12 months or more, which of these giants, Honda and KTM, there's a K in there, and I went off the wrong way. Honda and KTM, which of them is going to get out of that hole first? Because they've got relatively
Simon's
similar
calling
bikes.
it for KTM.
It is. Well, it's clear that KTM are moving forward. It is very clear, and exciting stuff. So let's just run through. Otherwise, the aero they had on there, they had a couple of different aero things, and they also had a Aprilia style wide ground effects style belly pan. They had some big new wings on the front that kind of along the same shape, but protruding out the front of the bike more. They're clearly bigger, would give it more
even
downforce,
I could tell with that.
Yeah, I think I don't know anything about aero, but it looked like that's going to give you some more. The prototype bike also had different tail unit, so this whole thing together, Brad said he liked it, but it still needs some tweaks. So it sounds like, again, they've made a step forward, but they've probably lost something in some other area, maybe top speed with all that down, who knows. But from what I took from Brad's debrief, it did help wheelie area, but maybe not somewhere else. So again, they've got another direction that they'll be working on. And all of this aero work that KTM are doing, the team manager, Francesco Guidotti, confirmed that this is KTM. It's not yet the first versions of Red Bull. What is their name?
The department.
The Formula One guys that I saw in the garage at Silverstone, who are working on the aero for Red Bull KTM. They haven't received the first stuff yet, so I imagine in February we're going to see that first stuff compared to the KTM's newest version. So they look like they're going forward, and again they're working on the engine, and so that's going to take a step forward again. I'm a little bit excited about KTM's progress. I've always said they're close. It's just they need some more, and it looks like they're going to make a step in all areas. I think that at the beginning of 23, I said beginning of this. Well, when we first heard about Pole coming home, I thought
we should say for our friends at Gas, technically he's not coming home.
Sorry,
he's gone to Gas, but the machinery, of course, is the same. But they will be scoring their own.
All this talk about coming home, it's the World Cup soon. I'm getting excited.
So, guys, just to throw in quickly, I think it's sad for the rookies of this year, because their timing wasn't right, for them to get the most out of their first year in MotoGP. And that was sad. Career changing, sad. But the KTM riders from here might have timed it right. That's my gut feeling.
Okay, well, where do we go off now? Because you've given us two segues there. Oh, sorry, Elliot. You go.
Yeah, I just want to big up Brad Binder a little bit more for his 2022 campaign, because obviously I know us three all love him. Most people do love him, because if KTM can find that a couple of attempts to half a second that they need throughout a weekend, then he's going to be a title contender for sure. I mean, his race in Valencia was unbelievable. To come from trying to pass Pecco for a good few laps, he said he lost a lot of time. He was obviously being a little bit cautious because it was Pecco, to finish just 3/10 off the win. And I was looking today, chatting with Fran before the podcast. He finished closer to Aleix in the championship than Aleix did to Pecco. And obviously we were talking about Aleix being a title contender for so long. I think with the KTM he had this year, it was strong in some parts, but for a lot of it, it was very inconsistent. I just want to shout out to Brad Binder basically and be a bit of a fanboy because he's had an
he was just
unbelievable year.
1 point off Jack. He was
Yeah,
1
exactly.
point off finishing the year in the top 5. And he had those 2 podiums. Obviously, we've seen him win races before as well. But it's just like, imagine in the most excited voice you can. What I want to see is like just a 2-person race of Brad on the best KTM possible and Mark on the best Honda possible. And I just want to see how much stuff is left on the bike by the time they cross the finish line, because they both race so wonderfully brutally. But yeah, so yeah, shout out to Brad. Where should we go now? We can go. Sorry, go Simon.
Well, the thing is with Brad, and like you said about Mark and Fabio, that's why I go to those 3. You can guarantee they wring everything out of what they have, which is fantastic. It's why we admire them. I think that's why you admire them. Why you admire Brad Elliott? You know, why you said what you did.
For sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. We just chapeau with where he ended the season with it's not by far a really bad bike or the worst bike on the grid, but it was obviously a year where they were
it was mainly qualifying, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was obviously a season where they themselves recognized at the start of it, like, right, this is just like, let's take a breath. So to have still ended up so far up in the standings and have those performances is pretty epic. So I don't know, where should we go now? Because there's like Aprilia and Miguel, or there's Honda. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go, sorry.
The weakness of the KTM, the lack of turning in the middle and the drive, it's spinning up, off the corner. He's been battling with that the whole season, and you need that drive grip to get the lap time, for qualifying. So he's been starting fairway back, and when he didn't start fairway back, he was right there. And when he started fairway back, he still marched forward. So, yeah, big admiration for Brad's season. And like I said, timing this year, we might get to see what he can really do.
That's exciting.
Where we go next?
No. Well, yeah, there's 2 obvious segues. I think for now, should we go with Miguel and follow him into his future? Aprilia, like we said, bit of a damp squib at the end for Maverick, having really not so many points in the last few races, and then Aleix really dropping off in the championship fight as well, and in the 4th overall in the end. But they do now have Miguel and Raul, and Miguel for sure certainly stole my headline or part of it for the test report, because he was 4th straight out the box. What do we make of that? What do we make of the end of the season for Aprilia? It was a bit of a challenging one. What do you see for next season from them?
You can have a rough guide on times at a test, meaning, if they're right at the back struggling, something's wrong. If they are crazy fast, they're very happy, But in general, I don't take much influence, much notice of the times at a test, because you're always going to get some people who are just working on something and they need the race pace going around. They never put a soft tyre in and have an attack. Mark, for example, a couple of others. So it's hard to take anything from lap times at the test, but it's clear to see the people who were comfy straight away on their bikes, Alex Marquez and also Miguel Oliveira. They were comfy pretty quickly, weren't they? And got up to speed. And I've been ranting about Miguel for a while, that no, he's not a Binder or Marquez where they'll squeeze something out, force a bike to do something it doesn't want to do. But this is a quite crazy likeness, that I'm going to make, but I relate him to more something like Lorenzo, where he can just do beautiful, consistent times so fast when things are right, and that's why I'm a bit excited about him getting on the Aprilia. And even though the timing, he might have missed the best of the KTM coming, that I think that a lot of circuits, the Aprilia is going to be close. And we'll see Miguel do something special, like we know he can. So yeah, Aprilia getting a little bit lost at the end of the season, the flyaways and Sepang, which there's no excuse really to get lost there because we do the pre-season test there. They've got data on their bike there, where there was an excuse at the other flyaways. I asked Massimo Rivola about that during the test, and he said that basically, they need to work in some areas if they're going to have a chance to fight for the championship. Like they showed they can for so much of the season. And I think it's kind of makes sense. They've got the least experience of doing that of any of the manufacturers, because, KTM's newer to the sport, but Aprilia is newer to the front, aren't they? And it seemed like the two obvious ones that I saw Aprilia struggle with was it looked like electronics, like meaning a few problems, like human error in there, as well as not finding the right electronic setting for the race, like either too cautious, trying, like at Phillip Island, we saw both riders saying the thing's not going forward because of the electronics holding it back, trying to get that rear tyre to last the race, which is a problem in Phillip Island. And then we saw the other one we saw was struggling with the harder construction, or the heat kind of proof construction that they use at like Thailand and Austria. I think I saw my wife coming home.
I was going to say.
Oh, that it was my son.
Either that or you're being robbed.
Yeah.
Oh, no, someone ringing the doorbell. Sorry, guys. No, it's my son. Yeah, my wife doesn't look like that. Hey, buddy. So, we saw them struggle with that different rear tyre, to get the most out of it. They were trying different bike settings and electronic settings, which we can't see, but they never quite got it there. They did a pretty good job of fighting back in Austria, but at Thailand, it just didn't work for either rider. So they would have learnt from that, and hopefully they sort it for next year, because the bike's really close, isn't it? They did an amazing job. Just fell off at the end, and quite sad to see that. But at least they're starting with the next year with something that they know works. They've got to just fine tune and get some strengths in a couple of different areas, but they're close. I would say they're in second position bike wise, at the end of 22, which is something to be proud of. That's what I think.
It was a shame of just how far they dropped off, wasn't it? Because obviously Aleix was in the title fight all the way until they headed to Sepang, was it? Obviously Maverick had a really good middle stint with 3 podiums in 4 races, and then just the sudden drop-off. I know there was a couple of mistakes, human error in Japan for Aleix, but I think it just marred the season a bit, and you could tell Aleix's body language even in Valencia, especially after the test as well. I thought he'd be a little bit more up for it, but I think they'd just been sapped of all energy because of the way they dropped off. But I think you're right, so I think they do have the second best base package heading into 2023, and it's just a shame that Miguel contractually, that's the right word, couldn't say much about his debut on the Aprilia, because that would have been really interesting. I got told before the interview you can't ask about comparing it to the KTM, which was a shame because obviously that's what everyone wants to know. But yeah, he obviously got on really well with it, and Raul also said that he was really happy. Yeah, go on.
The whispers I'd heard from the KTM riders who got onto the Aprilia was stability, how planted the thing was. I mean, I only got one flying lap on it, but I had Mugello, but that is the first thing I noticed. The thing is glued to the road, with that arrow, how it works, and also how smooth it is. And I agree with that, with my first impression. I know it was at a lot slow speed, but Aprilia made a step, and Paolo Bonora told me about this. I think it was on a Tech Talk, how they got the connection of the throttle to give the rider confidence, the rider feel with that initial touch of the throttle. And I so can relate to that, because as a rider, if you don't have a good connection with the initial part of the throttle, you wait to try to feel where it is before you open harder. And if that gives you a good feeling straight away and you know where it is, there's no delay. You go. Does that make sense? You're not hesitating. 100%. And they think they improved their bike in that area, and also torque delivery, the way it delivers the power so it doesn't break grip. And so for me, Aprilia's strengths are their aero package, which obviously works with chassis, together with chassis, to have stability, and because it won't turn without the right geometry. And so aero package, chassis, and power connection and delivery, I think they've made some great progress in that area, and that'll be what those Raul and Oliveira will be feeling.
Wilco Zeelenberg said that it was so much more agile as well. Obviously, Miguel, and he didn't say specifically that's what they said, but he said himself, obviously they're getting used to the new Aprilia. He said it was so small, the fuel tank's so small, and it's just such an agile motorcycle. So obviously that's something that Miguel and Raul were really pleased about as well, which is interesting.
So the tech talk I did, the final one of the season, was with Paulo Bonora, and one of the things he said in there was going for a wider V. So they've gone from something narrow, he wouldn't confirm. I thought it was 72 or something like this I'd heard in the past. But a narrow V to, it's only 2 cylinders, so I'll make it to a wider one, was there's more room between the V to get all the airbox and everything in there, make the tank smaller on top of the airbox, get the rider lower, and that adds up to a smaller frontal area, less drag, pushing less air, faster top speed. How wild is that? So, they've made some amazing steps forward, and I think it's just finishing off that package. That's my honest opinion. It's just finishing off because the thing's good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's shown that already in so many races this year. It's won a race as well. But okay, so we've got 2 obvious elephants remaining in our debrief room, both from Japan. One is Yamaha. Should we start with Yamaha?
Sure.
Because now we've got 2 Yamahas on the grid next season. We have Fabio, who obviously, like we've said already, incredible rider, incredible season this year as well. Runner-up, no mean feat. And Franco, we should talk a little bit about as well. But what did you make of Fabio's comments after the test? And like we touched on briefly earlier, it sounded like their new engine had seemed much better on previous tests. And then in Valencia, it's like, actually, is this any further forward? What did you make of that kind of debrief?
I feel so sorry for Fabio. He's been waiting all year. No, the last 2 years, to go, this is my my new fast engine. And the crazy thing was he and Franco said that it was no faster. It was the same speed. And to me, it's impossible. It's impossible because, we'll start with the engine. Like, they first tested at Catalunya. They tested at Misano tests. I mean, he was so happy there. It was straight. We could all see it was faster. Both of those tests, they've got data showing the bike is faster, the engine's faster. Then they made an upgrade to that engine with the time they've had between Misano and now. Carl tested it in Jerez, said his quote words were, "It's a rocket," that came from Mayo Mirigali, when I asked him on the live. And it wasn't. It was the same thing, which to me is impossible. But
how is this possible?
It's impossible.
Yeah,
it's so confusing.
Right. So to me, it's been a long year. Everybody's tired. There's got to be some sort of human error in there somewhere.
And it's probably not human error going through Fabio and Carl.
No.
They're going to know what they tested and what they felt coming from the bike. So there's something at Valencia.
I believe, and I also hope for the Yamaha rider's sake, that the bike is faster. They've found something. I mean, they've even got dyno runs in that to show it was even better than them. They've got 2 steps. It has to be some human error, like meaning sitting on the laptop, that something uploaded is holding the bike back because it's not the right setting in there, or the engine labels were wrong and they put the wrong engines in there.
That's what I went through my head, but surely not. Surely they couldn't have done that.
I know, surely not. But there is something. I mean, I was trying to find out at the end of the test, and nobody is allowed to tell me. But even the look on their faces was like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So right now you can guarantee that they're going through everything to find what it was, and then they can reassure their riders, because I think that's really important to be able to, early as possible, reassure Fabio, we found it. Oh man, it was this, because it has
he
to
also
be that.
He tweeted basically, we need more thanks, or whatever. I mean, it was a photo of him, I think, celebrating, but the caption was very much like, hi Yamaha, thank you, bye.
Hope they keep
so definitely wanting
like
a bit more. Yeah.
Well, I said it out loud on the live that I was sure that Fabio was going to be smoking at the test and fastest at the end of it. I predicted that because I expected him to get that engine and be so happy, big smile on his face. We know, and when you're happy like that, look, show everyone what it can do, and that didn't happen, and I'm super sad for him, because he's been waiting for it and trying to keep his head up all season, and he did such a good job of it. He needed that little uplift. Anyway, we've raved enough about that, but you now know what I think, and I think it'll come out. It'll come out. There'll be something.
Okay, interesting.
That
so that is a little bit of hope, though, for those Yamaha fans or Fabio fans who ended Tuesday night crying into their napkins. But let's
not forget to run through what else Yamaha had there. They had some sparkling new chassis, one for each rider, Franco and Fabio. Franco was really happy with it. He said, it's a step in the area that I like, and the entry and a little bit turning and front feel, that I believe they lost at the end of 2019 machine, when the 20 came in. So just for the people that like the tech stuff, beginning of 20, they tried to make the bike go faster. They did. They got a bit more power, but part of the way they did that was the air intake at the front of the bike. I'm not quite doing it right, but anyway, the air intake at the front of the bike went straight through the steering head, like all the bikes do now. Ducati, I think, were one of the first to do that, and they were having success with that. So basically, the air is getting funneled straight in the front of the bike, straight through the steering head area, into the airbox, into the engine. No ducking around somewhere else, and the engine that the 2020 Yamaha had to make all that airbox and everything work didn't even bolt in the 19 chassis. So they started with a new era of bike, and even though it was based on the previous one, that bike never handled the same as the 2019 bike, I think. Going on rider comment where they struggled. Everyone loved the 16 when it came out, 2016 to 2019. Everyone liked it. Everyone rode it quick, made friends with it quickly. And everyone struggled to do that on the 20 bike. And I think from then on, they've been trying to keep that extra power, that funneling the air through past the steering head, chassis totally different, had the extra power, but to get that feel back that they had. And Frankie, I could tell, had a step forward with it. But that was the shiny bike in unpainted one in Valencia test. But Fabio said he didn't notice the difference. There was no difference. But that's because Fabio already had the bike. He already had that chassis from Mazzano tests. This was an upgrade, but he didn't, meaning it had some bracing around the steering head under the front of where you traditionally is the fuel tank. Had some welding and bracing there, but Fabio couldn't feel the difference between the Mazzano test chassis that he got and this. But Franco, this is the first time he's been in a good frame of mind and tried it, and he liked it. So, but basically, it sounds like he's liking the Mazzano chassis. You see what I mean? So they had different aero there. It was kind of like the KTM one that Binder liked. These two big square wings, one bolted on each side, and I think, like you said earlier, we can all see that's going to give some more downforce. Big surface area, kind of double wing square thing. Also, the tail wings on the back. Also, some, the little Yamaha have only got those little, about this size, wings on each side of the belly pan, front of the belly pan, near radiator sort of area. Different shape of those. Fabio sounded liked much like Binder, and which is correct. Felt that there was more downforce, less wheelie, but got to look at the data and double check everything that we're not losing lots of top speed, because Valencia, let's face it, doesn't have much top speed, but it's a good track to test anti-wheelie, whatever it is, devices, electronics, and aero, because there's lots of slow corners that you're driving off. Anything else Yamaha-wise? That's all I can think of.
Yeah,
I think we just need to champion Fabio's year as well, don't we? We bigged up Brad Binder, fanboyed over Brad Binder. I think we need to fanboy a little bit over Fabio, because he was, I led the charge on that one, but you joined in, didn't you? I think we just need to quickly mention Fabio's year, because obviously Pecco was outstanding as well, fully deserved the title. Fabio obviously took it down to the last race of the year, the decider. I think the start of the race ultimately cost him a chance of victory. I don't know if you agree with that. The battle with Jack Miller and then obviously Pecco as well. And then the gap was just a little bit too big, wasn't it? I think it was 2.5 seconds to the front group. But just a few thoughts on Fabio's season, because it was unbelievable. Like you say, it was an underpowered Yamaha, and he, rode the thing like crazy, didn't he? He was just fabulous.
I totally agree with you. And the night before, I thought, it's going to be hard and it could go either way. But I really think, right at the days before, I really think that Fabio can do it. He can win it.
Yeah.
And the thing was, with an inline bike, you need that start, like Rins did. So you can run your lines, and there's no V4 stopping in the middle of the corner, stopping your corner speed, and to be able to do the lap times. And I would have loved to see if Fabio had got out with Alex, and not had V4s banging into the side of him or having to bang into the side of them, whatever it was. Because I think he could have run. That's only my opinion. Could have run with Alex, and that would have been interesting to see what happened. Not taking anything away from what Alex did. We'll get back to that. It was amazing. But we knew that without the front row, without the start, it's always a nightmare for the inline machine. So, and Alex Rins showed what you can do if you do that. Get a magic start, and you can ride like those two. So, just a little thing on Fabio's year is just standing back looking. The last 2 years, I've seen Fabio fight like unbelievable against faster machinery, trying to make up the difference, doing some spectacular stuff. And both seasons, sorry, Fabio, but both seasons are tapered off a little bit at the end. Not all his fault. Aragon sure wasn't. I had him up for a podium there. Wasn't his fault. The rain turned up right where, again, I had him down for a podium, in Thailand. So not all his fault, but some of it in general was also, but I purely think that is because he's had to push so hard. And how do you go to so many races pushing up to that level, trying to make up the deficit? And I think it must be mentally so hard. draining knowing that you've got to do something extra special now, extra special, but you've got to do that every session, you know?
I think that was
It must
interesting
be,
as well. In when we got to Sepang, and it was like, genuinely now, if you don't make this happen, you're out of it. It's like something just disappeared. And it, like, from Australia, obviously a tough one, Buriram a tough one. That dip seemed to be over again in Malaysia, where it was like, it kind of walked back in like, oh, I'm Fabio Quartararo, let's go. And I
All or
feel like we
nothing,
got
wasn't it?
that
wonderful.
back in Malaysia and Valencia. Obviously, sadly, in Valencia, wasn't quite able to do it. But yeah, it seemed like that dip, like it felt like the screw was just tightening and tightening and tightening from sort of Assen onwards. But then in Malaysia, it was like, this shouldn't really be on the podium, but I will put it there. Let's go and
Yeah,
let's go and
again.
enjoy some prosecco. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
a great.
bang
I
on.
don't know. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed just the way he was, because he seemed fairly destroyed after Australia, and then just the way he was in everything in Sepang, like stealing that camera and all of that stuff. It's like, this is the person who won in Portimao. Welcome back, and we're very happy to see you because you're great.
It seemed like a conscious effort too, that he knows that he's the best when he's smiling and relaxed and having a laugh, not stressed and grumpy, and he can do something special then. And I think he was fantastic this year. I so
Yeah.
hope Yamaha get a bit of that feeling back, the turning that they lost in 19, get another step, and they find out what was wrong with that engine, because I think it's there. We saw it in Misano. I saw it with my own eyes how fast it was, how better he
Yeah,
was.
literally.
So I think they're going to find where it went missing. And yeah.
Hopefully, it's literally just mixed labels. But right, okay. So the final one then, Honda.
The
As
big one.
we said earlier in the season, Fabio is like the blue Marquez. Let's talk about the Marquez, number 93. Bit of a warning shot at the end of the test. We can't fight for the championship on this bike. They've obviously also got Alex Rins, Joan Mir joining them. I say Alex Rins because we've already talked about him. Sorry, Joan. I know he won the championship in 2020. And then obviously Taka, for a little bit of consistency, remains there after some injury struggles. But he did get a few things on Tuesday as well. Where do you want to start with Honda, Simon? I'll leave it with you. Take
Well,
us
let's just do
away.
an overall. An overall of. Well, first of all, you mentioned Mark. I've seen a bunch of quotes from press and that slamming Honda. I listened to his debrief and I really appreciate his honesty. I don't think he was kicking Honda at all. He was just saying the truth where they are, and it wasn't too brutal. I listened to the recording. It was basically saying that the bike that they turned up with was a little stronger front end wise, but it lost some drive wise, and they don't have any spare to lose rear grip wise. That's one of the weaknesses of the Honda. I threw that last bit in. He was just saying stronger, better on the front end, but we lost some in another area, and overall the bike's the same sort of lap time, and no point doing a time attack because it's, basically he can do that. It's the problem is the race pace, to be competitive.
Yeah.
I think he was really fair and really honest, and I really appreciate that, because when riders have to cover up the truth, it's boring for us, and so they're in trouble, And the scary thing is they've been trying all season, with a umpteen number of chassis, and from last year's bike to the 22 bike, which had sounds like engine in a different position, rearward, and it seems like they're going round and round in circles, but not finding a real step forward. And to me, it's really worrying, really scary to be at the beginning of the 23 season at the first test and be no further forward, even engine-wise. Mark said that, it had a little bit more torque, but not enough to fight with the opposition, So Honda have the biggest winter of everyone, to turn up, and their test team as well. I imagine, they're going to have to build a heap of things and get a heap of testing done to get to where I think KTM is now, has found something to work with. That's my impression. I'm not trying to be harsh. It's my honest opinion of what I've felt, and also atmosphere in garages. Just the look of we don't know how to fix this or where to go next because we've tried everything. That's the feeling I get. So like I said, it's really interesting, this battle of these two giants, of motorcycling world, KTM and Honda, because in Le Mans is when I first said it. This is where I see them both. The riders are saying similar comments. The machines, KTM and Honda, are similar. KTM came into the sport, hired a lot of Honda guys, built something around similar to the winning bike at that time. Probably not imagining that the winning bike's going to start heading down that way. So they followed, and it was super interesting for me to see who's going to start first rising out of that lull, figuring out what it is that they need to change. And to me, even KTM's at the moment, in my opinion, ahead of Honda on that rise back out from this tough time, So
it's interesting.
Rider-wise, I've got to just quickly mention.
No, go for it.
The rider lineup Honda have is exciting. I mean, they've, like you said, consistency. Tucker, it was pretty clear that Ogura didn't want to move up. He didn't feel he was ready. I really admire that. I love the way he just said, well, it was I didn't want to,
Just said no.
Yeah. Also, would you want to get on it right now?
Exactly.
I wouldn't.
Exactly.
I wouldn't wait for them to get on the rise back out, then jump over. Good on your eye, clever boy. The other thing is Rins and Mir. I admire both those riders. They're awesome. And then they're next to Marc Marquez. Honda, in my opinion, have the strongest rider lineup on the grid. And if you give those three winning bikes, we're going to see some Hondas up there, and so it's in the ball's in Honda's court. They've got three, I think, giants of our sport ready to go, and it's going to be super interesting what they turn up with in Malaysia, because man, if they, they're a giant. They really are. I'm not exaggerating, am I? And they're going to be pulling all the stops out, going, and I can't wait to see what they turn up with at Valencia. Sorry, at Kuala Lumpur.
I keep wanting to say Valencia as well. I'm getting very confused.
I'm
exactly.
always confused.
You're never confused. Come on.
I
don't know. Is there anything? Is there
Sorry,
anything else that we think we've missed off from this?
Just something more on Honda. Go on. No, go on, Si.
No, just what I didn't do for the people that like the details is where Honda are struggling. And the crazy thing is, they are losing clearly to Ducati, but I would say pretty much everyone on scrubbing that speed off quickly, getting the bike to stop early on, quick. Then they're lacking, which is lap time, that is super important. Then, especially to do it safely, to scrub that speed off. I think all the manufacturers have been working on and improving in that area in the last couple of years. Then, especially since aero has turned up in the devices, it's why the front tires are overheating, getting so much stress. We may be able to touch on that too. Put that one down as a one to bring up. Then they've got a lack of front feel as they go into the corner. That's why we see so many crashes, but also because they haven't got the speed already scrubbed off. They're putting too much stress on that front, and then the thing hasn't got good rear contact, meaning the rear on the ground to try and help stop that bike. Like I mentioned, the Ducati's so good at the rear helping the bike stop, so you don't have to load that front so good. Mark pointed out, the rear's always off the ground, Then they have a lack of rear grip as well. I mean, and then in Malaysia, it was obvious that they had a lack of speed, So right now, it's the first time ever I've been able to say I can't see a strong point, which is damn scary if you're a Honda rider.
You say that though, you can see a strong point, because the strong point is most definitely, first of all, Mark, and then Alex Rins and Joan Mir. They do have that going for them.
Point, but they can only ride around so much, and I think the gap is too
100%.
big for
they can't
any
keep
of them
making
to be able to do something.
miracles. But do you think, it's an interesting one as well, in terms of, like we said about Miller going to KTM and using that first run to be like, okay, how is this different to the Ducati? I remember one really funny comment a few years ago when I think Iannone switched to the Aprilia as it was at the time and was like, these are basically just not electronics, which was a bit brutal. But obviously going from the Suzuki as it was then to that was like, oh, wow, okay. But it's interesting to me that Honda have contracted both the Suzuki riders, who are both coming from an inline four. And yes, they're both great riders, but it's an interesting one, because they could have potentially played it a little bit wider and picked a few from different places.
Well, like for example, sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm trying to think of someone that I would take over those two amazing riders, like one's won a world championship.
I'm not saying I would.
Kind of has a V4. Okay. I think they've played a blinder, considering they didn't really have a bike to entice them over. They obviously, my guess is they paid Joan well, otherwise he wasn't going to do it. He's a proven world champion and got, in my opinion, a V4 style. And then poor old Alex was probably left with, there wasn't any other bikes on the grid. And he's a great rider. They probably stole him, poor old Alex. But the result is that they've got the strongest lineup rider-wise on the grid, in my opinion. And now the ball's in their court. Let's hope they can do something with it, because they've got an awesome opportunity.
Mark made a point about the rider lineup. He said, obviously, they've got himself. They've got Joan Mir and they've got Alex Rins, obviously won 2 of the last 3 races. He said, I pitched the question of, it's a huge win for yourself and Honda, obviously, for Mark to get fully fit again. And he replied with, it's a huge win for Honda. Mark knows what he's got to do. He's going to do it. But Honda also needs to know what they're going to do. But are they going to be able to do it? Because, like you say, Si, they've got Rins, Mir, Marc Marquez. Taka's shown glimpses of speed in the past as well. He's not a bad rider by any means. He's got to sort his hand injury out. He's got to have another surgery with that, which didn't help them during the test. It's a huge winter, and it's a shame again we couldn't hear from Mir and Rins about their actual thoughts on the first day on the Honda, comparing it to the Suzuki, because we weren't allowed to ask.
I think the lap times showed it. As much as I wasn't watching the lap times,
exactly.
They struggled to get to where they'd want to be. It took a long time to get there, so that kind of showed us. You mentioned something about Tucker. The value of Tucker is like having the value of Carl when he was doing the races. They can, during the season, test with Tucker, which where a racer can't. There's not enough time. So I'm sure their idea is to use Tucker for that, is to go, and Tucker, I believe, knows it. He said something in Japan that kind of let me know that he will let us all know that that's what he's thinking. He's up for it. His job is not to aim at the best result, although of course he's going to do that. It is to run through things the whole weekend, even if it's going to handicap him. He'll go, okay, bolt that in. I'll tell you what it does. Try a tyre that they haven't tried yet. You know what I'm saying? I think it's going to be valuable for that.
I feel like the value of Tucker as well in many ways, because Honda have got the change with Rins and Mir coming in, is that he's not Marc Marquez. he knows the bike, and he's not arguably the greatest. Everyone from the VR46 camp, feel free to come and argue about that. We love the debate because they're both incredible. But one of the true greats at controlling a motorcycle it's always going to be good to have a good, talented, but much more normal rider who will be able to test those things for you as well and not just pull a miracle out straight away. It's like Casey Stoner. I would struggle to take Casey's feedback as a test rider because it's like, but you can make it do everything.
True. Yeah, that's true about Casey. Yeah, bang on. I think the main thing is having a rider that can ride within 1 second of your fastest rider. To test your bike, Actually, it was Marco, who is Michele Piro's crew chief, that said those words. They're not mine. And he said that's part of the value of the test team, and that's why they go forward, is having a rider that's within a second, can ride within a second. They test at Mazzano a lot, Mugello, and he can go within a second of Bagnaio's best, which means they've got real feedback. And I think Tucker can do that. So they can try things on Tucker. So, yeah, there's a real value to it.
Cool. Well, shall we wrap up then on a random little, we love you, Tucker, and excited to see what you can do next year.
Can I think we've gone through a worry of mine that I wanted to bring up. I don't know if I meant to, but it's a worry of mine, is this front tire pressure thing. I've seen so much of it the last couple of years, last 3, and they're policing it a lot more strict next year because everyone will have the same sensor, which makes sense, that they can't police it close enough now.
We should actually say that sensors. For those of you who maybe only saw one side of that story, the data that quote unquote leaked from earlier this season, that is data provided as part of the testing process to design or to choose the spec sensor from next year. So it wasn't that anyone was being illegal, it's that everyone was giving their data to, because obviously if everyone's using different sensors, you have no idea what the margin is with each one. But yeah, just wanted to say that as a little disclaimer for everyone who got immediately angry at one rider or another.
Fran, the truth can ruin a good story. So, hey, so Danny Aldridge explained it on the live to me during the test that the sensors at the moment are not only different, but the way that information is passed can be tampered with. So you can make it look higher or lower, by putting some resistor or whatever in the line, where next year they will not only have the same sensors, but they'll have the encrypted way to get it there, so there's no tampering, But the worry on my side is not that. The worry on my side is there's so much heat that comes off these bikes. I mean, this is a rough idea from me. Say the thing's doing 16,000 RPM, 4 strokes every second fire, so they're pumping out a litre every second. So 8,000 litres of burning hot air pouring out the back of that thing, as well as glowing exhaust pipes, brakes, radiators, engines. It's mental heat coming off the back of them. You only have to stand behind them, Elliot, when they're warming up, and you're not even getting the engine heat. You're only getting the exhaust heat. That's all you're getting, and it's wow. It's like nice on a cold morning in Valencia. But what I'm saying is, a couple of them ahead of you, a group of them ahead, on top of all the stress you're putting on the front tire, roasts you. Like, roast the front tire really makes it rise. The riders complaining, I feel really sorry for them when they've got a group ahead in Thailand or Malaysia where it's already sweltering, you're already drenched, is brutal, And what I understand from talking to a few different people is that you have to set your tire pressure. It's it's front, not the rear is not such a problem. You have to set your front tire pressure on a scenario of a race. So you've got to imagine, am I going to be in the group or am I going to be alone? And set your tire pressure on that. Because more than one team has pointed out to me that they've seen the data, they've been in the group and they've got the pressure right. It's bang on. That's where they expect it to be. They're in the group and they've got the pressure right. It's working. It's in the right range. Too high, the rider's going to crash or streak backwards trying not to crash because it's so much pressure in there, little contact patch and no grip, no feel, locking up. Then they do a long lap penalty or run off the track, come back on, they're alone, and it drops. They're doing the same lap times, but it drops to the point where next year they'll get banned, excluded from a race because it's dropped below the minimum, and I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out. So
I think this is, don't quote me, but I think it's a window, isn't it? It's not for however much time on this lap it dropped below this. Is it 70%? That it should be within particular parameters.
On a lap, it has to be, it's only a small amount, but it has to be within the minimum, in that range, for a short amount of time. It's only a little, but it has to touch on that, so you're close to the minimum each lap. If you do your lap and it doesn't touch on that minimum for a certain amount of time, it's only short, your lap's cancelled, qualifying. That's what I've been told. Then in the race, again, it's a percentage of the race that it has to touch in there. But all I'm saying is it's already difficult. You've got to choose if you're in a group or not. You're either going to be risking the rider crashing or getting now. So
and then you get a start like Pecco at Sepang and the plan is completely out the window because you've gained 7 places in 7 meters. Yeah.
Hey, just one other thing. So I said, why don't you run nitrogen, not dry air? And Piero Taramasso said there is very, very little difference. Teams have tested it. And of course I went, I don't believe you inside. As nice as Piero is, I'm like, there must be some difference. I looked into it, and if you Google it, if you do a bit of reading, dry air with air with no humidity is more or less the same as nitrogen, how it reacts to temperatures. So, I don't know what they're going to do. So I hope it's not as difficult as that.
Okay, well, we'll find out, won't we? So,
one more thing. Sorry, we could go all day, but one more
I have another
super
thing
important
as well.
one.
I'll go after Stein.
It's about the championship. We've got to finish on, and
Go
plus
for
yours, Elliot. We've got to finish on. Is this year Pecco won the championship with 5 DNFs. It's never been done before. There's 5, right? 5? Is that am I correct? I'm bad with stats.
Yeah, I held up 5.
Matt
sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I thought no, stop. I'm wrong. No. So.
Sorry.
And the reason is Mark was injured, out. Fabio's bike wasn't up to the job, I think, the job that he was trying to do and can do. In general, others had problems, and I don't think it's going to be like that next year. Next year is going to be hard to win, and you can't afford to have those crashes. You can't afford to.
I think he knows that as well, though.
I think everyone knows it. I just wanted to make sure the viewers know it. It's going to be a tough one. It's not. You can't afford to have those mistakes. So, from the beginning, I think it's going to be everyone at their very best.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Polo Spargo going back to Gas on the RC16, how happy he was to be back on a motorcycle that he enjoyed riding. I think it was like a few laps into his opening run, he sort of got really giddy on the motorcycle. Did a little dance. I mean, the Espargaros are just. Paul said this because I asked him about it. He said he's very hot-blooded. He needs to express his emotions when they come to him. Alicia is exactly the same, isn't he? But he was. I mean, you've probably all seen it. He was so happy to be. I think just enjoying riding again. And we know how quick Pole was when he was last on the KTM, and to see them potentially making a big step forward with their new bike and the Gas team as well. had a lot of new stuff thrown at him. He's got Augusto as his teammate. But that KTM machine / gas, the politics there, I won't get into what we're calling it.
Well, the constructors' points will be split. This is what we were talking about before we came on air.
We'll call it the gas
score
bike.
As gas, like they do in Moto 3. Although obviously the machinery is pretty similar.
Yeah, so it's a KTM bike, but it's a gas. But I'm super intrigued as to how Pole will go next year, because we all know how quick he can be. He fought Mark in Moto 2 and beat him in Moto 2. He's a very fast rider, and we all love Pole, don't we? He's such a great character to be around, and I'd really enjoy him to be back up enjoying himself and challenging for race victories. So I just wanted to point that out, because that was one really noticeable thing about the test for me.
Yeah. So I tried to do a bit of digging on what he felt, and what I got told was that he liked the ability to be tucked in on the bike, hanging off, have his knee and elbow on the ground, and the rear wasn't letting go, and he felt together with the bike again. I heard the second hand, not from Pole. So excuse Pole if that's not completely correct. But it sounds like he was missing that, because that's what he couldn't find the last brand, And I think that's why he was so happy. He felt gelled together again and riding the bike like he wants to ride, which I can totally understand. The reason, though, that I'm hesitant is I've been really happy to be back on something before. And but I was a second off, believing I was going to get that in that last second, and I didn't. There was something missing. So I'm hesitant. I'm not. Yeah. I hope he can do it. I really do. But don't get excited until it's in that last second, because everything changes in there. And sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you hit a wall, and meaning the progress can't come.
Yeah, a metaphorical wall, don't worry.
Yeah. I love that the Espargaro brothers, there's kind of, for want of a better way to put it, no filter. It's great for us and great to hear what's really going on, because they are a bit like that, and full of enthusiasm, and no, they're not politicians, they just come straight up with it, which is usually great. So yeah, and Pole is fantastic to have in the press conference, etc., because he speaks really well. So anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts.
I think a lesson.
Be hesitant.
I think a lesson. Pole,
but he's timed it right, in my opinion. So good luck, Pole.
I think a lesson Pole would have learned. We're talking about him getting excited, but he also got very excited at the start of last season, this season, whatever you want to call it, at the start of 2022 about the new Honda. And obviously got the podium in Qatar. They got really, really excited. So he was much more calmer in the interview than he was out on circuit when he was sort of dancing and celebrating. But it's a good boost for him. But yeah, they've not, obviously he knows all too well now they're not going to get too excited before the first couple of races at least have been done, because obviously pre-season testing in Sepang and I think it's Portimao, there's going to be grip out there and not a true sign of where the bike and rider may be, as we saw with Honda early in the year, but a good sign nonetheless for Pole.
Yeah, for sure. And also, it's just nice to see people happy at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I love motorcycle racing. I love testing and trying to learn more about the tech stuff, which is my weakness, which hurts my feminist heart. But it was just nice to see someone go out on Tuesday and just be like, yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely loved it. So yeah, well, I think we'll wrap there then. Thank you so much, Simon, for your time, as always. Thank you for the power bank I've inadvertently temporarily stolen from you from Sunday. And thank you for all of your insight. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you as well.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks for the call, guys. And I look forward to Malaysia to see all the new stuff and what everybody's dug up over the winter. So
yes, and we look
I love
forward
my job.
to
I've got to
hearing
say,
from you in
I
Malaysia.
think I love it more every year. So you don't have to thank me. I'm just I want to talk about it anyway.
Well, thank you so much. I was just going to sign off then with like, thanks, love you so much. It's true, but a little bit of a weird way to say goodbye. Thanks so much for everything then, Simon. Thanks to you, Elliot, as well. Although I'm about to see you in a second because we're actually sat in the same room.
Yeah. I'll turn
And
around,
everyone, enjoy the winter. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode and throughout the season, whether you've been watching, listening on audio only. If you have anything you want to see change or added or do differently next year, or just to say, yes, I really enjoyed this, please get in touch. Use the hashtag MotoGP Podcast, or however you wish to let us know. We're all on social media and with our real names, so you can find us if you dare. And thank you. Enjoy the winter, and we'll see you again for sprinting into 2023 for the Malaysia test.
Bye for now.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.